They told me I was too depressing for their holiday photos and locked me out on the porch in sub-zero temperatures. They didn't realize the cabin deed was in my pocket and the locksmith was already on his way. By the end of this story, you'll learn why the person holding the keys always holds the power and why sometimes the coldest thing you can do is simply close the door. The snow was falling in thick white sheets when we pulled up to the cabin. It was the place my late husband Henry and I had built with our own savings 40 years ago, a sanctuary. We had laid the stones for the chimney ourselves. We had sanded the floors on our hands and knees until they glowed like honey under the afternoon sun. But this year, the cabin didn't feel like mine. My son, David, was driving, he gripping the steering wheel of his new Range Rover, a car I knew he couldn't actually afford, and sighed loudly. Finally, he muttered. I thought this drive would never end. Beside him sat his wife, Brenda. She was scrolling through her phone, the blue light illuminating a face that had been set in a permanent frown since we left the city. In the back, my two grandchildren, teenagers now, had their headphones on, completely sealed off from the world and from me. I sat squeezed in the middle seat between a cooler full of craft beer and a pile of ski gear. I was 74 years old, and I was made to feel like luggage. Okay, everyone out, Brenda commanded as the car stopped. We need to stage the living room for content before the light dies. David, get the bags. Mom, just try not to be in the way, okay? In the way. That was the theme of the last 3 years. Since Henry died, I had become an obstacle in my own family's life. I stepped out into the biting cold. The air smelled of pine and memories. I reached for my small suitcase, the same beat-up leather one Henry and I took on our honeymoon, but Brenda stopped me. Leave that for a second, Mom, she said, not making eye contact. We need to figure out the sleeping arrangements first. I froze. I knew this cabin. I knew every room. There were 3 bedrooms, one for David and Brenda, one for the kids, and the master suite, the one Henry and I had built, the one with the view of the valley. What is there to figure out? I asked, my breath clouding in the air. Brenda exchanged a look with David. It was the look I knew well. It was the look of 2 people who had already had a conversation I wasn't part of. We walked inside. The fire wasn't lit yet, and the air inside was colder than the air outside. So, Brenda said, clapping her hands together, David and I will take the master, obviously. The twins need the second room for their gaming setups, and the third room, she paused. The third room was the guest room. It was small, but it had a heater and a bed. The third room, Brenda continued, is for the influencers. I blinked. The who? The influencers, Mom, David said, annoyed. Brenda invited a couple from the city. They have a huge following. Having them here, tagging the location, it could really boost the property value for when we eventually sell. When we sell, not if. So where am I sleeping? I asked. My voice sounded small in the high-ceilinged room I had paid for. Brenda pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the kitchen. The mudroom. I looked at her. Then I looked at the door she was pointing to. The mudroom was a 6x6 enclosed porch. It wasn't insulated. It had a concrete floor. It was where we kept muddy boots and wet skis. It was where the dog used to sleep before he passed away. It's insulated enough, Brenda said, shrugging. We put a space heater in there and an air mattress. It's basically glamping. Glamping, I repeated, in December in the mountains. It's only for a few nights, Mom, David said, brushing past me with a case of wine. Don't be dramatic. You're always complaining about being hot anyway. It'll be refreshing. I looked at my son, the boy I had nursed through pneumonia, the boy whose college tuition I had paid by working double shifts at the library. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. Fine, I whispered. I walked to the mudroom. It smelled of damp wool and old rubber. There was a single deflated air mattress on the floor and a sleeping bag thrown on top of it. I could see my breath in the air. I sat down on the cold plastic mattress. I didn't unpack. I just sat there, listening to them laugh in the main room, listening to the pop of a champagne cork. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt cold in a room full of people? Have you ever sat in a house you built, while people who never laid a single brick told you where you were allowed to exist. It's a specific kind of cold. It doesn't just chill your skin, it freezes your heart. And in that freezing, something happens. The sadness turns brittle, and then it breaks. And what's left underneath isn't grief, it's clarity. I wrapped my coat tighter around me and closed my eyes. They didn't know. They didn't know that this cabin wasn't just a vacation home, it was a life raft. Henry and I built this place in 1982. We didn't have a contractor, we didn't have a loan. We had weekends and we had grit. Every Friday, we'd drive up here in our rusted truck, sleep in a tent, and work until our hands bled. I remembered the winter of '85, the year David needed braces and the car broke down in the same week. Henry wanted to sell the half-finished frame for lumber to pay the bills. No, I had told him, we keep the land, I'll take a second job. And I did. I cleaned houses, I scrubbed toilets in homes much nicer than this one, so that one day my family would have something that belonged to us. I saved every penny in a coffee can taped under the sink. When David was 10, he carved his initials into the front porch railing. DM. I never sanded it out. I wanted him to feel like he was part of the wood. Now, that same boy was in the other room, drinking wine I couldn't afford, laughing while his mother sat in a room meant for dogs. I heard Brenda's voice float through the thin door. Ugh, this place is so rustic. We definitely need to gut it. Open concept, glass walls, get rid of all this dark wood. It's depressing. Yeah, David agreed. Mom's hoarded so much junk here. Once she's, gone, we can really monetize this asset. Once she's gone, they weren't waiting for me to leave. They were waiting for me to die. I stood up. My knees popped. The cold had already settled into my joints. I walked out into the living room. The influencers had arrived. A young couple, polished and shiny, were taking selfies by the fireplace. Brenda was directing them. Tilt your head, babe. Make it look cozy. Perfect. I cleared my throat. I made cocoa, I said. It was a lie. I hadn't made anything. I just wanted to be seen. Brenda spun around. Her face fell. Mom, what are you doing out here? You're ruining the shot. I live here, I said softly. You're ruining the vibe, she hissed. Look at you. That sweater has holes in it. We're trying to create an aesthetic here. Luxury, cozy, not whatever this is. David stepped in. Ma, come on. Just go back to your room for a bit. You're bringing down the mood. We'll bring you some dinner later. Maybe. My room, I said. You mean the mudroom. It's a room, David snapped. Stop being ungrateful. We brought you here, didn't we? He looked at me with such disdain. Not anger, disdain. Like I was a stain on his perfect picture. Bringing down the mood, I repeated. Yes, Brenda said. Honestly, having you hover around is depressing. It's Christmas. People want to see joy. Youth, not reminders of mortality. That was it. The snap. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a branch breaking under the weight of snow. I looked at David. I looked at the initials carved into the porch railing just outside the window. And I realized that the boy who carved them was gone. I see, I said. I turned around. I didn't go to the mudroom. I went to the coat rack. I put on my heavy parka. I put on my boots. Where are you going? David asked, distracted by his phone. Out, I said, to get out of your way. Good, Brenda muttered. Take your time. I walked out the front door. The wind hit me like a physical blow, but I welcomed it. It felt cleaner than the air inside. I walked down the driveway past David's Range Rover, past the influencer's rental car. I kept walking until I reached the main road. The snow was deep, but I was fueled by a fire that had been dormant for too long. I didn't walk aimlessly. I walked to the nearest neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, who lived a half-mile down the road. He was a notary public, a man who respected paper. As I walked, I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the leather folder I always kept with me. You see, David and Brenda made a mistake, a very common, very arrogant mistake. When Henry died, David assumed the house passed to him. He assumed that because he was the son, because he was the man, because he was loud, that he owned the things I was quiet about. He never checked the public records. He never asked to see the trust. He didn't know that the deed to the cabin wasn't in a trust at all. It wasn't in probate, it was in my purse, and it was solely 100% in my name. If you are listening to this, I want you to check something right now. Who holds the paper? Not the promise, not the verbal agreement, the paper. If your name is on the deed, you are the captain. Never forget that. Paper remembers what people forget. I knocked on Mr. Henderson's door. He opened it, surprised to see me covered in snow, eyes blazing. "Martha," he said, "is everything all right?" "No, Arthur," I said, "but it's about to be. I need to use your phone, and I need your stamp." I called a number I had saved in my contacts for 3 years, a developer, a man who had been pestering me to sell the land for luxury condos ever since Henry died. I had always told him no. I had always said this was a family legacy. He picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "this is Martha. Is that cash offer still on the table?" I could hear him sit up in his chair. "Yes, ma'am, it is." "Can you wire it today? Can we close tonight?" "It's Christmas Eve, Martha." "I know. Do you want the land or not?" "I'll have the paperwork there in an hour." And he did. He drove through the snowstorm to Mr. Henderson's house. I signed the papers on Arthur's kitchen table while sipping hot tea. The amount was staggering, enough to buy a small island, enough to never sleep in a mudroom again. I signed my name, Martha Ellingboe. "When do you want possession?" Mr. Sterling asked. I looked out the window toward my cabin, toward the lights where my family was drinking my wine and waiting for me to die. "Immediately," I said, "I want the locks changed tonight." Mr. Sterling smiled. "I have a guy." I stayed at Mr. Henderson's while the sheriff and the locksmith went up the hill. Mr. Sterling went with them. David and Brenda had gone out for a night ski session to get content for their social media. They left the house empty. When they returned, the locks were new, deadbolts, heavy commercial-grade steel. I wasn't there, but Arthur's grandson filmed it from the tree line. I watched the video later, David trying his key, jiggling it, then shoving his shoulder against the door. "What the hell?" he yelled, and "the key's not working." Brenda shivering in her metallic ski suit. "David, it's freezing. Fix it." Then the porch light flicked on, but it wasn't me who opened the door. It was a security guard hired by the development company. "Can I help you?" the guard asked. "This is my house," David screamed. "Open the door." "I'm afraid it's not, sir," the guard said calmly. "This property was sold this evening. The new owner has requested that no unauthorized persons be allowed on the premises." "Sold?" Brenda shrieked. "Sold by who?" "By the owner," the guard said. "Mrs. Martha." "My mother?" David laughed, a frantic, hysterical sound. "My mother is senile. She can't sell this. She doesn't even know how to use an iPad." "She seemed pretty sharp when she cashed the check," the guard replied. "She left a note for you, by the way." He handed a piece of paper through the crack in the door. David snatched it. He read it aloud, his voice trembling in the cold wind. "Dear David and Brenda, you said I was bringing down the mood. You said I was clutter. You said you wanted to monetize the asset. I agreed. I sold the asset. The clutter is gone. Enjoy the vibe. Love, Mom. P.S. The mudroom isn't locked. You can sleep there until the Uber comes. It's insulated enough." They didn't sleep in the mudroom. They were too proud. They walked 3 miles down the mountain in ski boots to the nearest town. They spent Christmas Eve in the lobby of a Motel 6 because all the rooms were booked. I heard Brenda left him 2 months later. Apparently, a husband without an inheritance wasn't part of her aesthetic. As for me, I didn't stay in the snow. I took the money. I kept enough to be comfortable, very comfortable, and I donated the rest to a charity that builds tiny homes for homeless seniors. Right now, I'm recording this from a balcony in Fiji. The air is warm, the water is turquoise, and there isn't a single drafty window in sight. I miss the cabin sometimes. I miss the memory of Henry. But I know Henry would have been the one handing me the pen to sign that deed. He built that house to keep me safe, and in the end, it did. They told me I was dead weight. They told me I was depressing. But here is the truth. I wasn't depressing. I was just inconvenient. And the moment I stopped being convenient, I became powerful. So, to all the grandmothers, the mothers, the quiet ones sitting in the corner while the family drinks your wine, Check your purse, check your deed, and if they leave you in the cold, lock the door behind you. If you have ever felt invisible in a room you helped build, or if you know a woman who is being treated like furniture in her own family, give this video a like. Let's show the world that we are still here and we are still holding the keys. And if you want to know exactly how I structured my affairs to make sure I could sell that house in under an hour without my son stopping me, you need to subscribe. Next week, I'm walking through the ironclad grandmother checklist legal steps to protect your assets before they try to take them. You do not want to miss that. Click subscribe, class dismissed.